Welcome to the regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council on Wednesday, October 21st, 2020. It's now 6:30 p.m. and we are, as you can tell, still doing our meetings on video conference, teleconference. The information on how to join us is available on our city website. Also, how to call in if you have a public comment, or how to send an email to our city clerk if you have a public comment. So I'd like to begin with roll call, as Allison can do the roll call.
Councilmember Kandel,
Here.
Councilmember Hilmer,
Here.
Councilmember Paulson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Haroff,
Here.
Mayor Way.
Here. Second item on the agenda is public comment, and public comment is available for members of the public to address the City Council for matters that are not on the agenda. It's time for members to step forward and address us on issues, just remembering that since it was not agendized, we can't go into lengthy discussion about it, but we can ask for it to be agendized at a different item when it could be properly noticed. So do I have anyone in the audience who has raised their hand and would like to speak to the council for matters not on the agenda? Looks like we have two hands. So whoever is 925-1151. Could you introduce yourself, please? You'll need to unmute. There you go.
Hello, this is Dr. Stephen Wagstaff again.
Hi.
Hi. So I have a business account with the city of 352646, and I've been paying for the last 10 years. And I'm not getting the response that I need regarding my medical practice by the bridge construction. And the last time I brought it up, I was muted before 3 minutes. And I'd like to put this on the agenda for the 4th.
I think we have an update on the Bon Air Bridge coming up.
Which I don't think it includes this. So again, I had to take a full week off of my practice in July, and that was 3 months ago. And my concerns have only been addressed by, hey, we can tell you about some of the scheduling, and then when I say that scheduling has not been accurate and not satisfactory, it's told to me, as was stated in the last meeting by Dan, no way we can predict such large projects. So the only thing I've been told is that, hey, we're going to try to predict it, and then I've been told the caveat as to why we can't predict it. And again, so if I'm doing a procedure in my office with a scalpel, and I have a lady sitting across from me, and we can't even hear each other, and the ground is rattling, I have to stop the procedure. So it got so bad on July 17th that I was calling in, trying to get a meeting, trying to talk to, I even emailed the mayor, trying to get some feedback about what do I do, and I had to take a whole week off. And then it's continued. I have a full documentation of patients in the room that are willing to testify that we can't even communicate with each other. Just no management, no city manager actions to help out. I mean, I'm doing nothing. I'm just here practicing. And the bridge work is being done with this powerful attitude of eminent domain, but no provisions for if it's outside the bounds that you guys had predicted, and no plans of what to do about that. If it cost a nickel to relocate me, you could have done that. So if it's a money thing, that's an issue. But
okay, I'll make sure. I know Public Works Director Julian Skinner is on this call, so I'm sure he's heard your comment, and so has City Manager Dan Schwartz. Thank you.
And so I'd like to be on the agenda for next meeting.
All right, I'll get back to you about that.
Okay, well, I was told somebody would get back to me after the last time, and nobody's gotten back to me.
All right.
And so I brought it to the attention of the manager that I've been paying dues, and then he couldn't even find me in your system. Like, it's that level of just disregard. And he told me that he was going to get back to me after a conversation, and then it took 3 weeks. He had still not gotten back to me, and I had to contact you, the mayor, to get him to reply to me on an email where he said, "I'm sorry, I was remiss."
So
like, just total disregard.
Yeah. All right. We'll work on this at a different time rather than this public hearing time tonight. Thank you for calling in. We have someone's hand raised from Folio. It says, is that you, Alex? You'll need to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Alex.
Hi, thanks for giving me this time. I'll be really brief. I'm just kind of speaking on behalf of the merchants on Magnolia. And my interest is for the holiday season to have some kind of lighting and banners and some kind of activity and excitement about the downtown. I know we haven't, the merchants, as far as I know, and I've been a merchant for 25 years in Larkspur, have not asked the city for any kind of, support or anything to do with a Christmas feeling. And I know the cities in towns across the Marin during this pandemic, there seems to be a lot of activity and a lot of energy in the downtowns. And I feel like Larkspur's completely lacking. And so I've taken it upon myself, and I've talked to other merchants. We'd really like to have some support and some excitement and something around getting this downtown a little more, for the residents as well. We appreciate their support. And in turn, we do a lot with our own little windows and our own decor for Christmas. Now, I'm hoping that the city could support us and at least put some lights and maybe some banners or something that would say thank you for the support of our residents, and B, make it feel like that we're as special as these other towns all over the county. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Alex. I know we're working together on that, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Is there anyone else who has their hand raised? I don't see any. Is there
I'm
any?
looking for any emailed public comment, and there is no email public comment.
Okay. All right, so we will close public comment. That brings us to item 3, presentation proclamation, and this is a legislative update. Who's speaking on the legislative update? Or do I have an old agenda item? No, there you are.
It's going to be Shannon O'Hara, the assistant to the city manager.
Hi, Shannon.
Right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm giving a very brief update on the California State legislative session for the year 2020. 2020 in many ways has been a unique year. We plan each legislative session to provide the council with an update moving forward. And so with the end of this session, we just thought we would update the council and the community. So first off, not to get too schoolhouse rock on the council and the community, but just some basics about the California State Legislature for those who might not know. Like the national legislature, there's 3 branches of government: the executive, which is the governor's office, the legislative component, which is the state assembly and the state senate, and the judiciary, which is the state Supreme Court and the lower courts. California has a professionalized full-time legislature, which actually is not at all uniform in most of the country. A lot of legislatures meet part-time with very minimal staff. I'm sure if you talk to those folks, they'd say that their part-time job takes up more time than most full-time jobs. But in terms of both staffing, how much legislation is produced, and where the power lies within the state, if you look at state, local government, counties, etc., California is one of, probably can count on 2 hands that has that kind of structure. We have 80 assembly members that serve 2-year terms for a maximum of 6 terms if folks were elected after 2012, and 40 senators who serve 4-year terms for a maximum of 2 terms if elected after 2012. Larkspur and Marin is represented by Assembly Member Mark Levine and Senator Mike McGuire. And so going into this legislative session that started in January, the priorities set by the governor and the legislature as a larger body included housing legislation, including legislation that would change housing production, affordability, as well as addressing homelessness and unhoused folks, as well as climate change legislation. Legislation proposed included housing package bills, primarily from the Senate, also from the state assembly, that would have included significant changes to CEQA processes, zoning ordinances, rules around duplex creation and allowances for housing on underutilized commercial sites and other sites. On an average year, over 2,000 bills are authored and approximately 1,000 advanced to the governor's desk. About 80 of those are signed into law. To give you an idea of how 2020 went, approximately 470 bills advanced to the governor's desk and 457 bills were signed into law with 56 vetoed. So the ratio of bills signed by the governor wasn't remarkably changed, but the sheer amount of legislation that was proposed this year was greatly reduced. I'm guessing both the council and our community, even if you don't follow these things closely, could guess why. In March, COVID happened. So understandably, for a number of reasons, the focus really shifted to deal with the COVID-19 situation. At the beginning of that, at the beginning of March and into mid-March, when it really became apparent that there would be significant changes to both how we do business here, how the legislature would do business, and some of the guidance the state would be providing their communities. The legislature immediately said that legislation would be scaled back for priority legislation, and COVID would take precedence. Other major, particularly weather issues and environmental issues as they came for wildfires, flooding, any of those issues would remain. And then there was still a focus to get as much housing legislation passed as possible. The legislature, particularly the Senate, took a break for a couple of months. And during that time, I won't go through each change, but the governor extended a number of executive orders to deal with the COVID-19 situation. And it was a very dynamic situation. March already feels like it's 2 decades behind for me. I don't know about other folks, but at that time it was both very unclear where we would be in numbers, mortality, hospital capacity, other health considerations, economic considerations. It was also very unclear what the national government was going to do, or any guidance or regulation that was going to come down at the national level. So,
Great.
I'm not done. Sorry, just take a pause.
All right.
So most legislation.
You're on a roll. Keep going, please.
Did not pass. I've had a lot of coffee, so I'm talking fairly quickly. Most legislation did not pass. This is the state legislature works on 2-year cycles. So this was the 2019-2020 legislative session. So anything that did not pass this year cannot be reintroduced as written. However, themes, priorities, and certainly contents of these bills will come back next year and years into the future. Housing in California isn't going anywhere, and climate change is certainly not going to go anywhere in the next few years. I will highlight a few bills that passed, notably. So AB 725 from Assemblymember Wicks changed provisions around moderate income housing in metropolitan jurisdictions in terms of both what is considered moderate income and above moderate income housing categories, and how that must be allocated to certain sites within zoning, as well as a couple of density bonus laws. So there is AB 2345 from Assemblymember Gonzalez that also revises density bonus laws to increase the maximum allowable density and number of concessions and incentive a developer can seek. On rental evictions and eviction relief, notably, one law was passed, that is AB 3088 from Assemblymember Chu, which establishes a moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent due to COVID-19 financial hardship with certain conditions, and through January 31, 2021. There were also a couple of COVID-19 workplace bills passed. SB 1159 from Senator Hill creates a presumption that the illness or death related to COVID-19 is an occupational injury and eligible for workers' compensation benefits. AB 685 from Assemblymember Reyes is also has some exposure notifications and violations, and the measure requires employers to provide written notice and instructions to employees who may have been exposed to COVID-19 at their workplace. And then lastly, there were a couple of things towards the end of the session that got both attention locally, statewide, and even nationally. So I just will bring that up. There were a number of law enforcement related bills that were introduced into the session. One that was signed was AB 1196 from Assemblymember Gibson, and that measure formally ended the use of the Carteroid chokehold by law enforcement in California. as well as Assembly Bill 3121, which is the bill that the governor signed, which establishes a 9-person task force to study the issue of reparations for descendants of slaves in California. So this isn't by no means exhaustive of everything that was passed, everything that was proposed, and everything that's on the outlook. So if I omitted anything or folks have questions, by all means, this isn't comprehensive, but this is kind of an overview of this session, both on how unique it was, as well as some of the legislation that did emerge out of this time. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. I just want to remind the council and the community that the Marin mayors and council members have a legislative committee that meets monthly to go over matters of legislative matters that are of importance to our constituents here in Marin. And Shannon is our serves as the gatherer of information and the assistant to Mayor Alice Fredericks, who chairs that committee. I serve on that committee for Larkspur, and Vice Mayor Haroff is the alternate for that. So first, are there any questions of the council members of the report of the legislative overview?
Madam Mayor, no questions, but I want to thank Shannon for a very diligent and exhaustive report. So it was terrific to hear. Thanks.
Anyone else? Great. Well, that committee meets as the years go by, if anybody else on our council is interested in being our representative, that committee meets the end of the month, Mondays, the end of the month, every month.
At 8 a.m. You
8
should
a.m.
also, when you get people to recruit people for this committee, it's an 8 a.m. Monday meeting. So
Yeah.
So I thought that was illegal, but maybe not.
And then occasionally there are meetings that are called for by our assembly person and our senator to gather that group together to get their feedback. So
yeah.
I rest assured that our representatives in Sacramento are paying attention to what Marin has to say. All right, if there's no more questions, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Is there any item from the consent calendar that a member of the city council would like to pull for discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public who has a consent calendar item that they would like to pull for discussion? I don't see anyone. So at that, I will take a motion to approve the consent calendar as indicated.
So moved.
Gabe Paulson, and is there a second?
I'll second that.
And that's Dan Hilmer seconded that. And Allison, may we have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Candell,
You got to unmute.
I do, but I see a positive vote there.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Hilmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Haroff,
Yes.
Mayor Way.
Yes. So that brings us to 5, which is the city manager's oral report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. First off, I wanted to let you know that the Chamber of Commerce is doing a fundraiser. You can purchase See's candy just in time for Halloween or the holidays, and a portion of the proceeds will help the chamber. And folks can visit the larkspurchamber.org website to get more information. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. All members of the community are welcome to attend free Zoom cybersecurity training that's being hosted by the County of Marin on Wednesday, October 28th at 6:30 p.m. We've placed some information on our main webpage about this webinar. October 29 from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. the County of Marin and the city staff from Larkspur, Corte Madera, and San Anselmo will be available to answer questions and provide information regarding new tools for homeowners interested in adding an accessory dwelling unit on their property. There's information about that workshop on our website as well. And then we just want to keep reminding folks voting is underway, and we really encourage everyone to vote. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Any questions from the council on that? Very straightforward. Will those dates be posted on our website?
They will.
Okay.
They may be already, actually, knowing how efficient our staff is.
Great.
Madam Mayor, if I could just comment on the Seas Candy and the Chamber of Commerce. I participated in our monthly meeting with the Chamber of Commerce this morning, and that's when we approved going forward with that. And I think it'll be a terrific way of both generating funds for the chamber, but engaging with our business community. So that avoids me having to announce that during my own presentation. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions, we'll move to number 6, council members' reports and comments. Anybody would like to begin? I know Dan Hilmer had a smart listening session planned on Monday. Do you want to update us on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was a very engaging session. We had, I want to thank Vice Mayor Hara for attending and participating. And I also want to thank the city staff and the city manager for helping get the word out about that session. We had roughly 30 public participants registered for that session, and probably 60 overall attendees. It lasted 90 minutes. We had received a wide-ranging number of comments and questions from covering issues such as safety, the experience of the riders on the train, future planning for the Larkspur landing area. It was very interesting. We had members of the bicycle community in attendance, as well as property owners from the Greenbrae area. It was a very interesting and substantive session. I'm very grateful. And the next smart listening session is slated for November the 12th, focusing on San Rafael. So we look forward to having people tune in and bring their questions and comments. Thank you.
Was the whole board there, the smart board, or just a few members?
A good number of the board members were there. It was impressive. The most impressive aspect of it was it ran the full 90 minutes and there was still interest to carry it on, but we encourage people to tune in for the San Rafael session on November the 12th.
Great. Any other council member have any report? Looks like Gabe unmuted himself. Hi, with your God rays behind you.
Yes, so just a few announcements for fire season and for COVID. We have the NRG drills on Sunday. That's the following this Sunday, and that's the daylight savings time Sunday. So, for any people listening or for council members, maybe to get the word out there, this is a chance for all the 42 neighborhood response groups in Larkspur and Corte Madera and the Twin Cities to practice what would happen in the event of either flooding, which is coming possibly, or fire, earthquake, and more to be announced and probably put up on the website. Also, I just wanted to say that for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency, our former mayor, Larry Chu, was selected for the Citizens Oversight Board to represent Central Marin. So I was really pleased to see him, and he'll be able to provide input and feedback, and is certainly, well, acquainted with all the issues here. And then for COVID, I guess I just wanted to restate the obvious. If people haven't done it already, to get their flu shots, and to maybe remind reluctant people to get flu shots. And one question came up during a meeting as to how we're doing contact tracing in Marin. I thought I would just mention what Dr. Willis said at the county meeting, that we have 70 contact tracers, and they're going to be posting all the metrics on their website soon. And they either have achieved or are trying to achieve the goal of tracking 90% of the people who report COVID within 24 hours and the people that they've contacted within 48 hours. So we know that we're getting into a time where there's less ventilation and more flus, and COVID is rising in some parts of the country, and we're doing very well in Marin. But just to encourage people to get the flu shot and to stay tuned to what's going on with the health department, the contact tracing. And that's it. Thank you.
Good point. Other council members have any reports or comments that they would like to offer tonight? Councilmember Candell?
Sure. I have a little bit of a spotty reception tonight, so just let me know if you can't hear me. Kevin, if you want to take over, I was just going to talk about the Sir Francis Drake meeting that you and I went to.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The gist of the meeting, am I being heard fluidly, or is it
Yeah,
connection
no,
problem?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So my take on that meeting was that as of now, nothing has really been established other than the fact that the county would like to work as a whole and either all decide to change the name or not. There's still some research being done on the exact costs. I think what would probably work best would be when Kevin and I have that information, we present it to the council. The council can give us their feedback and concerns. We present it to the group that can be taken into account so the group can make a decision as one, as opposed to having the group make a decision and come back to you for your approval. So that's my thought of the best way to handle it. And Kevin, if you disagree, please feel free to say, but that was really the only report that I had tonight.
Yeah.
Is there a plan for that that listening group to meet again?
There is. I don't know if it's actually been scheduled yet. I imagine it'll be another month or so. I think, yeah, they wanted to wait till after the election. And we're also waiting for some more information about the costs before we have that next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it'll be in December. So.
Okay, sounds like we have no other further reports, so now we can move on.
So just to Madam Mayor, if I could, I think I'm on mic. But I want to thank Councilmember Kendall for his report on that conversation. It was really a very productive conversation, and I think it raised and made progress on a number of different issues regarding that matter. I did participate in this morning's Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I just want to express my appreciation for the efforts of the board members of the Chamber of Commerce for making progress. I think we're going to try to do something over the holidays that'll be helpful for hopefully a couple of different of our business districts here in the city. I think we were all a little disappointed to learn that one of our Chamber of Commerce members, Joe Jennings, is resigning. He's moving to be closer to his family up in Seattle. So we will lose his contribution here locally to a variety of different things, including the library project. But I just wanted to state my personal appreciation for all the efforts that Joe has done and his contributions to a number of different aspects of our community. So kudos to him.
Yes, I agree. All right, let's close that item and move on to what I think most of our audience is here for tonight, which is our public hearing, 7.1. which is an appeal of the Parks and Recreation Commission's decision of September 17th, 2020, to deny the removal of 2 heritage trees from the property located at 321 West Baltimore Avenue. I'd like to tell you how this is going to go. We're going to have a report to the staff report. I think Aaron Matthews, assistant planner, will be giving that report. And then the council members can ask questions at that time. I'd also like to have the opportunity for Councilmember Paulson and Councilmember Kendall, since this is their first tree commission, Park and Rec Commission appeal, to ask any further questions you might have about process. We haven't had one of these in a couple of years. So we did have an appeal from a planning commission, but this is a little different. So if you all would like to then take an extra amount of time for us to answer those questions about process, that would be perfectly great. I'd like to point everyone in the community to the letters that we've received, and also an applicant's arborist report addendum and a applicant structural assessment report addendum. And those are all posted on our website now and visible for everyone to see, and also some public comment letters. Since this is a public hearing, we will be taking public comment at tonight's meeting. So what we're going to try to do is, after that, then we will have the appellant join us in the Zoom frame so that we can try to see each other, which is harder to do in this Zoom setting. And then we'll try that. and see how it goes. And then we'll open it up to a public hearing. Does that sound good to everybody? Okay, so the first step is a staff report, and it looks like we have Assistant Planner Aaron Matthews. Welcome. Nice to see you. I don't think we've seen you at a meeting yet, so
Yeah, this
nice
is
to
my
see
first
you.
city. Yeah, this is my first city council meeting.
Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. So on July 1st, 2020, Tammy Wicks-Kornfeld submitted an application to remove 4 heritage-size coast redwood trees on her property at 321 West Baltimore Ave due to concerns regarding health and safety issues related to the condition of the trees and their proximity to the residents on site. On July 20th of 2020, a public notice was posted on the site and mailed to the surrounding neighborhood, advising that the property owner applied for a permit to remove 4 coast redwood trees from the property. The owner's arborist had submitted a report listing the reasons for requesting the removal permit. And I'll read the reasons for trees number 3. Both deformed trunks extend over the house and represent a moderate to high risk of failure in a 3-year time frame. And tree number 4, the health of the tree as indicated by vigor, foliage color, and density is rated as moderate. During the 15-day public notice period, the city received 1 letter of protest from Stephen Habneros, the owner of 369 West Baltimore Ave. And that protest was received on August 3rd of 2020. The city has, at the time of this writing, the city had received 3 additional letters, 1 in objection and 2 in support of the heritage tree application. Since then, the city has received multiple late mail letters. The matter was initially scheduled for the August 20th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission. However, the applicant's representative, Len Rifkind, requested that the hearing be delayed so that he and the arborist can be available to attend the meeting. On September 4th, 2020, Mr. Rifkind submitted a letter addressing the required findings for approval and providing some additional information and letters of support. During the September 17th, 2020 Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, the commission heard comments from the applicant's representative, the arborist, and engineering consultant, and neighbors, both in support and opposition of the tree removal. After posing questions and discussing the matter, the commission conducted separate votes for each tree, approving the removal of trees number 1 and number 2, and denying the removal of trees number 3 and number 4. Len Rifkind has filed an appeal on behalf of the applicant, Tammy Wicks-Kornfeld, of the Parks and Recreation Commission's decision of the September 17th Parks and Recreation Committee to deny the removal of trees number 3 and number 4 out of a total of 4 coast redwood trees requested for removal from the property located at 321 West Baltimore Ave. So staff recommends that the City Council review the staff report, application materials, and attached letters, hear the appellant and any other members of the community who wish to voice their input. The council should then refer to Larkspur Municipal Code section 12.16.070, subsection F, to find for or against the removal of the trees. Staff has also provided 2 optional resolutions for the council's consideration. Resolution A, upholding the decision of the Parks and Recreation Commission and denying removal of the trees number 3 and number 4, or Resolution B, affirming the appeal and approving removal of the 2 trees. That concludes the staff report, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Aaron. So let's begin with any questions that council members may have of the staff report. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I have a few questions. The first is for tree number 3, which was denied. Was there a factual finding made as to whether there was actually a risk to the home based on this tree? So I think that was the reason for the requested removal.
Right. So I'm just pulling up a picture. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So that's tree number 3. So based on the arborist report, and the arborist is actually on the call, and I'm sure he'll be speaking tonight. But based on his expert opinion, he mentions that the tree is deformed and extends over the house, and within a 3-year time period, branches and the tree itself may fail. There's additional photos.
But as a commission, did you? Sorry.
Oops, you went out a little, Scott. Oops.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're freezing a little bit. Oops.
Okay. I'll be quiet and just let you talk.
No, go ahead. Now you're connected back up. Oh,
Okay. Okay. Is that okay?
yes.
Okay. So my question was just, did the commission, did you make a finding whether you believed that the structure was in danger over the next 3 years or not?
So from what I gathered from the Parks and Recreation Commission, they couldn't make that determination themselves. However, the reason they denied the removal of trees number 3 and number 4 is that they believe that there could be mitigation measures done to help save the tree. Again, I would probably ask the arborist who is on the line and was also at the meeting on their expert opinion of the matter.
I think we'll get to that when we open up
Sure.
to the public comment. I mean,
Right.
to that part of the meeting. Scott, you had a second question?
I did. For tree number 4, I was curious. It seemed to me that the reason for the request of tree number 4 was the potential the foundation or the structure, as opposed to the health of the tree. Was that something that was considered?
Yes, during the Parks and Recreation Commission, these following photos were shown. And this is a close-up of the tree roots and the rear wall of the home. There's also a brick retaining wall that was stated to be failing due to the roots growing from the redwood trees. There's also an additional picture of the floor sort of foundation and pavers that are being lifted. And it was stated this is due to the roots of the growing trees.
Okay.
Did the commission again make any kind of findings whether they believed this or not when making its decision?
I would say it's not a matter of believe or not. From what I gathered, it's that this wasn't the sort of wall failing or the pavers being lifted wasn't significant enough in their estimation based on the findings in the code section.
Okay, thank you. Those are my only questions.
Does anyone other in the council? Yes, Gabe, go ahead.
Yeah, Aaron, I wanted to thank you for the report. I sort of want to continue Scott's questions. So I believe the commission's hearing was about 2 hours long, and I listened to as much of it as I could. Are you the best person to ask, how they voted and what the decisions were, or is there anybody here who can, explain the reasoning a little bit more?
Sure. I can. So the trees were split up. They voted for each tree during the commission hearing. Trees 1 and 2 were determined that their health was at about 10%, and based on that and the findings required, the commissioners voted to allow the removal of trees 1 and 2. Tree 3 was voted on separately, and the commissioners felt that this tree could be saved or there could be mitigation measures to be had to save this tree, and the same with tree number 4. And that was sort of the decision with regard to the voting.
Yeah, and my recollection was exactly what you said. The vote was actually 4-1, for denying tree number 3. And there seemed to be 2 reasons. One was the health of the tree and that it could be saved. And the other was that they felt the damage to the house might be cosmetic, that moving of, bricks and whatnot is not actually lifting the foundation. But what I really am wondering about is more as the meeting went on and they were deliberating for this 2-hour period, they seemed to be saying that they didn't quite have enough information and they wanted to put the burden of proof back onto the homeowner and give clear direction saying, our denial is not final, but if you can show, that this will cause damage, then we'll vote differently. So it seemed to be a vote that was on the basis of ambiguity. That was my understanding. Do you think that's a fair summary, or do you see it differently?
I'd be inclined to agree with that assumption in this case.
Yeah,
That's the way I
Councilmember,
perceived it as well.
Councilmember Paulson.
Yes.
Who's a planning director, Toft, and excuse me, Assistant Planner Matthews was very helpful in shepherding this process to the to the protest hearing and now through to the City Council. And we've simply continued the process in the manner that the Recreation Department had done this, which is essentially giving the Parks and Rec Commission the discretion or full determination on the removal process. And I would say that in essence, the record of the hearing is the basis of their decision, the video and the minutes. And I do think both their motions reflected a recognition that the applicants may come back, that I think the term "give it time" was used in both these motions, and that the applicants may come back at a later date if they have more information on either the verification of the actual damage and hazard, as well as the potential or the lack of possibility of mitigating it through some form of mitigation to preserve the trees.
So Neil, in
Your
reference
take was
to
that
that,
just hadn't quite been addressed fully.
so Neil, in reference to that, and maybe Sky can weigh in on this, post that meeting, there were 2 additional expert reports that were submitted, which looked to clarify some of the questions that were brought up by the Park and Recreation Commission questions, and to refute some of those discussion items that they had. We can take those 2 things into account, those 2 items into account tonight as part of the record after the testimony.
Hi, this is Sky. Yes, you can consider this under the municipal code. The appeal hearing is considered a new hearing. So you do have the benefit of the commission's review of the evidence that was presented to them and their findings, but you can consider additional information that's provided as part of tonight's hearing.
So that would be important information that is in the McNair and Associates and the Turbine and structural engineering reports that were dated on, looks like October 19th, the addendums. So those were part of our packet. And I hope our members of the appellant can address some of those concerns when they speak in a few minutes. Is there other questions of Assistant Planner Matthews in regards to the staff report? Okay. So just letting Scott and Gabe ask questions of process now, if you have any, in regards to how how an appeal works. No? Okay, good. So just to remind everyone, we do have those additional reports that do address some of the concerns that came up by tree number 3 and 4. And I think what probably would be best is we follow what the what the Park and Rec Commission did, is to look at these as individual structures, 3 and 4, as they had done before. So it looks like if you have nothing further, Aaron, I will open this up to the appellant to speak if they would like, or an appellant's representative. Do we have anyone else who has raised? Len Rifkind has raised his hand. And Len, tonight we are going to, actually, Aaron, if you could close down your screen so we could have a wider screen And if someone would like to see the images again, we can bring them up, but I find it a little distracting. So I'd like to welcome Attorney Len Rifkind, who is representing the appellant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Before I start, I want to regale you with something that was never possible before COVID. While I'm speaking to you right now, I am also simultaneously at the Sausalito Planning Commission. I asked them to continue their hearing so I could be here, but they did not respond. So I am going to 2 public hearings at the same time. And my matter is on at the Planning Commission meeting as we speak. Right
We
now.
know you're capable of that.
I can barely chew and walk gum and chew and walk at the same time, but here we go. We'll give it our best try here. So again, for the record, my name is Len Rifkind, Rifkind Law Group, and I represent Tammy Kornfeld, who is the owner of 321 West Baltimore. And I think staff did a great job summarizing what Ms. Kornfeld was trying to do. I want to emphasize she has 26 trees on her property, some 18 in the front yard and 8 in the backyard. She loves trees. She's not a tree hater. She's a tree hugger. She loves trees. She's lived in the canyon for a long time. She's not here to take out trees. She has tenants in this property with the young kids. There's trees that fell in 2013. We'll show you some pictures later if I can figure out how to do screen share that crushed. Fortunately, no one died like 5 years before. She only wanted to take out the trees that are a real problem. Fortunately, the Parks and Rec Commission agreed to take out the 2 trees that were 90% dead. So let's not even spend any more time on trees 1 and 2. That's over and done with. We're only going to talk about trees 3 and 4. Council members Kendall and Paulson asked very good questions, and the mayor, of course, picked up on the fact that we do have new information by people smarter than me, namely an arborist and a structural engineer, that will give you the information of why I hope the commission will take out or agree that there should be a tree removal permit for trees 3 and 4. I'll briefly summarize what I think that you're going to hear. On tree 3, it's a 2-stem tree that's in the front yard. The tree was badly trimmed or pruned a number of years ago. So at the top of the tree, the 2 stems like this, it goes literally horizontal on the top, and those things, those branch stems at the top where it grew from the horrible cut are physically horizontal and go right over the top of the roof. We now have the new information that you'll hear from the arborist. Ms. Kornfeld hired a tree service. They climbed the trees, and we have beautiful pictures that Park and Rec wasn't able to see. They're going to see cankers and all kinds of different horrible things of why this tree is about, according to the arborist's new opinion, is imminent danger of failing. And the structural engineer will tell you on tree number 3 that if it fails, it'll crush the roof. So we don't think tree 3 is a close call. On tree 4, which is in the rear yard, it's a 3-trunker. And the problem with it is it's root compromised on 2 sides, by the retaining wall that you saw on one side and by the house wall foundation on the other side. The wall is the retaining wall is failing. So there's only 2 things that we can do. We can rebuild the wall in the same place, or we can move the wall out away farther from the tree. According to the arborist, it needs to be 4 diameters of the tree away. Option 1, if we rebuild the wall in the same place, because the wall was not built well originally, and to rebuild it to code properly and all of that, it's going to require drainage behind it. And that's going to require trimming yet more of the roots in order to do that proper drainage. And the arborist will tell you that's further destabilizing the tree. If we were to move the wall 4 diameters of the tree away, it puts it in the middle of the patio, and you'd have to literally rebuild the whole house because it would cover windows and doors. So it's just simply not feasible. So the problem is this house and the patio and the whole thing were just built too close to the tree. There is really no way to save this tree. It's causing too much problem, and you'll hear from the structural engineer about that and the arborist. So I won't belabor that. I had drafted a letter dated September 3 that I sent to Parks and Rec, and it went through the findings under Larkspur Municipal Code, Chapter 12.16. And so if you had a chance when you reviewed your packet to see the findings, I think that you can easily make the findings now that are required under this chapter. And so I'm not going to spend any more time on this because I know time is precious. And now we're going to hear from the arborist, James McNair.
So-
And go ahead, Madam Mayor.
So let's begin. I think it's best to take them, as you said, tree by tree. So before we move on to the arborist, there may not even be a question for the arborist, but let's see if there are questions that the council has of Len Rifkind in his presentation. No? Okay.
Madam Mayor, just this is Kevin. Yeah. So I very much appreciate Len Rifkind in his presentation here, and Len mentioned the total number of trees that are on the property in addition to the 4 that are under consideration here, and it was quite a significant number, I think, right?
26, Mr. Haroff. Kevin.
I prefer Kevin, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are a significant number of trees that will continue to thrive and prosper on this property, no matter what outcome of our decision is tonight. So thank you.
Councilmember Candell, did you have a question of? Oh, I'm afraid you keep freezing. We'll come back. Just interrupt if you get unfrozen.
I do. Len, thanks for the patience.
He's having Wi-Fi issues like I always have, but it's Scott's night to have Wi-Fi problems. Any questions of? This looks like Scott's still trying to get it dial in, but we'll come back to you.
Can you hear me if I pause my video?
Yes, that's better. Why don't you pause your video while you ask your question?
Okay, so Len, my question is, you mentioned for tree number 3 that there was a bad trim job and it caused it to go in a way that puts the danger. Is it possible for a remedy to be to trim this tree again and take off the house so that it?
So, of course, not being an arborist, and you can ask that question to James McNair, but if you trimmed it where the horrible trim occurred and the new growth occurs, there would be absolutely 0 crown left, and I think it would kill the tree. And I think that's what the arborist would say. Last time I checked, trees need some green parts, and this would have 0 green parts left if you cut it there.
Are there? I'd like to also, Ms. Wicks-Kornfeld, if you would like to speak also, you're the appellant too. I know you do have Len Rifkind there, but if there's something else you'd like to contribute?
So, Madam Mayor, we have Ms. Kornfeld is very articulate, and so I didn't want to speak long, and so we were going to have the arborist and the structural engineer speak briefly, summarizing the reports, and Ms. Kornfeld is batting cleanup and it's going to close.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. So that sounds like it's Mr. McNair's first.
Yes, please. Anytime, James.
Unmute yourself, Mr. McNair.
Unmuted. You hearing me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Am I able to screen share?
I'm not sure. We don't know how that works, but let me see. Let me see if if our assistant city manager or whoever's running the background here can do that.
James, if you put your cursor at the bottom, I can go to screen share. Just click screen share and you can do it.
I see James, I see you. Yes.
Is that working?
Okay.
Okay.
By the time this pandemic's all over, we're going to be experts at this.
Okay, very good. Well, good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I think it's the first time I've ever spoken before the City Council of Larkspur. I am a consulting arborist and horticulturist. I'm certified by the ISA, and I'm also an ISA qualified tree risk assessor. So I focus a lot of my work on risk assessments of trees. And I'm also the city arborist for the city of Healdsburg, and I've been on the city of Sonoma tree committee for like 30 years. So familiar with these processes. So I'm gonna get right into tree number 3. And here is the lower portion of these trees, the 2 red arrows. At the very upper end of this photograph, that's
I
where
don't
the
think we
trees.
see them,
No,
James.
we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, wait a minute.
Mr. McNair, you'll see a green, there you go.
We're there? Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
Missed the one button here. Okay, anyway, so here are the two trees that we're talking about. Tree number 3. They're joined here at the base next to the house. And what had happened quite a while ago is the trees were actually just severely topped, or the whole top of the trunk was removed. And so this photograph shows the response growth from that topping procedure. So here was the topping cuts. And because the trees were so shaded by more dominant, larger trees, they grew essentially horizontally out towards the edge of the canopy for light. And then in the case of this east trunk, once it hit the edge of the canopy, that new limb then started ascending vertically. So this is all the response growth. On the west trunk, the same thing sort of happened, but it's just very weak growth because of the problems with the decay and the amount of shading. So here are the photos when we did the aerial inspection. So this was all subsequent to the Parks and Recreation hearing. But we have a climber up in the tree and they're taking pictures. But this is the top of the west trunk. And extensive decay all through here, that red arrow. This old limb is dead, totally dead. You can see all the cavities and holes in it. And the single trunk that's alive is extending out to the left. Here's a close-up of that. So here's the one limb that's alive. Here's all the decay. The wood's just falling apart. And really what's holding up this one limb is some holding wood directly below that cantilevered limb where the yellow arrow is. So for this trunk, to me, I mean, this is severe. And I know the Parks and Recreation Committee were hoping that, the tree could be monitored and we could do something to improve it. But there's really nothing you can do here. To reduce the weight and the risk of failure, as Lynn said, you'd be taking off the one limb that's alive. And so on the east trunk, this is called a canker. So it's an area of a dead section of the trunk. And here's a side view of it. Here's the canker. The margin edge is somewhere in here. And what disturbed me most was I could see a fissure developing here at this edge of the canker. And all the weight of this larger limb that grew after the topping cut. This was the original topping cut. It's all cantilevered out and essentially, again, only being held by the wood below that connection. So the whole opposite side of the trunk is dead and we're having a fissure. And that's what really raised the alarm bells for me in terms of the possibility, under winter rain loads, I think this could fail at any point. On tree number 4, this is a picture.
Here, before you move on to tree number 4, I'd like to ask if any member of the council has a question specific to tree number 3 so that we can get those questions answered.
Sure.
Yeah, Gabe Paulson and Scott Kendall both have questions about tree number 3.
Yeah, thank you. Just to be clear, one remedial thought is that you remove the cantilever outgrowth. But I think from what you're saying, can you confirm that if that's done, then you essentially have a dead tree? So there's no point in taking out the overhang because then the tree doesn't have any way to sustain itself. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, essentially that's the only living part left.
Okay, thank you.
On the tree. Yes.
Thanks. Scott, you had a question?
That was my question.
Oh, great. Okay, if there are no further questions as to tree 3, I think we'll move to tree 4, and that may bring in Kelly Turbin in regards to the structural engineering. But why don't you begin, Mr. McNair, about the tree 4?
Right. Okay. So So essentially the concern with this tree is the history of root pruning. When the house was built, all the roots were cut on this right side and also on the in the foreground where the wall was constructed. So you had root removal on two sides of the tree. And all of this occurred within what we call the critical root zone. And the critical root zone is the zone of structural and primary roots around the base of the tree. And the two functions they perform is anchorage and two, also sustaining the tree as conduits for water and nutrient uptake. And if I'd been around when they built the house and they were doing the tree, I would have said, and I would have had made the recommendation for removal, in that cuts on two sides of the base of the tree and in that critical root zone just predisposes the tree to wind throw or collapse of the tree under wind and rain loads. Now, in the years since, these trees have gotten bigger, and as they get taller, that leverage force of the trunk is growing, is essentially extending upwards. So the leverage force is increasing on the base of the tree. Now, and the real problem here is if we didn't have to repair the wall, then I would consider this tree, probably okay, because the roots have grown against the wall and underneath the wall, but the wall is failing. And to do the repair is going to require excavation work back again into that critical root zone with the loss of those roots. So the concern here really is the loss of anchorage and the risk of the tree under really saturated soil conditions and wind loads that it could blow over from with that loss of anchorage. So that's essentially it.
My question, Mr. McNair, about that tree number 4, I visited the property yesterday, and that specific tree number 4 is actually 3 trunks. Is that it?
That's correct.
Or is it 4 trunks? I couldn't remember.
It's 3 trunks.
3 trunks that stem from one sort of root ball. Is that why you consider it one tree?
Yeah, it's connected at the base. So those were probably originally sprouts from an older tree. And so, and those, and it kind of interesting, those were also topped in the past, but because they were in open sunlight, they reestablished a straight trunk. So, in contrast to tree number 3, which was so shaded and grew horizontal trunks.
Yeah. I found it interesting that in the front yard where tree number 1 and 2 were, there's an old growth stump still standing there, the remnants of it, which I suppose is where many of these trees got their origin from, but I'm not an arborist.
Right.
So,
yes. Yeah. Well, when the redwoods are cut, they tend to sprout from around the base of the original stump.
Yeah.
So.
Is there a question about the tree itself before we get into the structural engineering issue? I don't see one. One of the questions that or comments that came up during the Park and Recreation Commission hearing was what other alternatives are there to protect the masonry wall. They didn't think it was a danger right now, and maybe a new retaining wall could be put in. So perhaps this is where the structural engineer would like to speak up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm getting an error 216 on my camera right
We
now.
can hear you, so.
Okay.
And we actually all have your report also.
Okay, great. Should I, to start my video, that's a screen share?
Sure.
All right. All right, can you see my screen?
I can see a black frame.
Kelly Turbin, I'd like to thank all of you for letting me speak tonight and taking this meeting. I guess I can jump right in, and since James left off at tree number 4, I will start with tree number 4. I presume everyone's had a chance to kind of read through the report. There's obvious wall damage and wall failure going on directly in front of the tree cluster number 4. Basically, the addendum that starts here is in response to the Park and Rec's recommendation to find an alternative to try to save the tree and also build a concrete wall that would, stabilize any type of failure from that brick wall, or to just stabilize the hill and the tree. So when we're building retaining walls around trees, we're always limited by root offset and trunk offset. So if we were doing this as a new construction project, where typically the project arborist says we need to be 3 to 5 trunk diameters from the base of the tree, which is where a new retaining wall can start. So if you see in this diagram,
Kelly, we don't see your screen, just so you know.
oh, you can't see the screen?
No.
We just see a blank screen and your voice.
All right, hold on a second here.
Sorry, I just wanted you to know that we're not looking at it.
Thank
The
you.
diagram that's in here.
All right. Can you see my screen now?
No.
All right.
Yes,
There we
there
go.
it is.
Great.
All right. So this diagram was like almost a feasibility study is what we would need to do to build a concrete wall here. If we go, I think I actually did this about 3 trunk diameters off of the base of the tree. We're essentially building a new concrete wall in the middle of her window. So, feasibly, yes, we could do it. We're going to have an 8 to 10 inch concrete retaining wall, offset. I think that was about 12 feet into the patio. There will be a footing below ground, which, based on, you can see the bulging directly below here and how that lines up with the base of the tree, the crack in the wall and the bulging. You're likely going to be also interrupting a root system if you come out here, albeit it's not as severe, but you most likely will be interrupting tree roots that would damage the tree if you did go out and build it in that location. Given the slope of the hill, you're going to be backfilling. Standard practice on building a new retaining wall is that the back slope can't be higher than a 2 to 1. The existing grade exceeds 2 to 1, so you'd have to go ahead and backfill at a 2 to 1 behind that wall, which would then essentially require that blue box that I'm showing on this part of the house would also need to be concrete, because you can't just put earth or backfill or dirt or any type of organic materials up against wood. You can only do it against concrete because of decay issues. So you would essentially be shoring the rear of the house up, building that blue box out of concrete, rebuilding the rear of the house, and now she doesn't have a door and half the window's gone. So, is it feasible? Yes. Is it a practical thing to do? I don't believe it is. To replace the brick, the brick facade and a wood wall in its existing place would require even more severe cutting of the root system. You'd also be, I'm sorry, I don't know why, okay. You would also need to, if you put the wall directly where this brick is right now, you do need to open the back of the wall up so that you can get a drain mat in there. You also typically have to recompact soil behind the wall. So if you did build it there, you're probably excavating an extra foot, which is cutting directly into the top part of that root system. Not to mention the footing would most likely extend, just a guess, it would probably come out to here. You're chopping that entire root system off, which isn't healthy for the tree, and I'm guessing it probably wouldn't survive. So I think building it in the exact location isn't feasible just from a tree perspective, not to mention the engineering challenges. As you wrap around the rear of the patio, the grade gets very steep as well. And again, we're going to be limited by, the grade behind the wall. We're typically limited to a 2 to 1 grade. We'd have to take that wall 10, 12, 15 feet up in the air and recompact. And then that's triggering a design review hearing, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a huge wall in the backyard that, technically we can't even build without killing this tree. So I think if I'm looking at this from just an engineering perspective, if we got this job, what do we need to do? I think feasibly we'd have to build the wall where it's shown here, which is going to, cut half the back of her house off. Not to mention it would be a huge expensive construction project, not just from a concrete grading engineering perspective, but also from a finish, you're pulling the siding, you're shoring the house, you're redoing the windows. That's a bathroom. So then her door's gone essentially, and she has half a window left in that bathroom. So I don't really see it as being feasible in this alternative. I was going to move on to tree 3 unless anyone has questions on this tree 4 in the back of the house.
Well, why don't we see if the council members have questions on tree 4, mostly in regards, it seems like, to the structural engineering issue of the retaining wall and the support structures there. I don't see any.
Madam Mayor, I have a question. Dan Hilmer here.
Dan Hilmer, go for it.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for your report. If the extent of the existing soil, as shown in the photo, were to remain exactly where it is, and you were to build a wall out from that point with all the tolerances needed for a new wall, it would be somewhere probably between the beginning of what you identify as the blue box on the left to somewhere nearer the door, not to the door. My point is, if you were to preserve all the soil and the root systems that are there as much as possible, would that be an alternative location for a new wall?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand where you're proposing it.
Look at the blue box you've identified there.
Yeah.
Okay, now somewhere just to the left of the door, if that were the location of a new wall, allowing for the drainage and the reasonable amount of backfill necessary. So it would be maybe a foot or two out from the existing wall. Is that a possible?
Well, I think James, that might be a question for James.
I was going to ask him next as
I mean,
how that would impact the tree.
I mean, our marching orders when we're trying to preserve a tree come directly from the arborist. I just by looking at it, it looks like you would cut directly through the kind of subterranean root system that's bulging the patio right now. But I think I would let James speak to that.
Okay.
Okay, okay, I'm still here.
Yes,
you're live.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think, the total concern here is, and it's really hard to project the impact, but when you're cutting significant, structural roots in the zone, you've just increased the risk of failure of the tree. We have an upslope tree. It's growing taller. There's a lot of leverage force on the base of the tree. And I think, that distance would not meet, what would be my minimum distance in terms of clearance from face of trunk. And, it's just, really almost impossible to predict, but except for the fact that you can say that the risk of failure just increases when you're cutting away roots like that. And again,
there would be root damage below the patio.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Because of all
Thank
the
you.
foundation work. So.
And there's evidence of bulging on the patio from root growth now. That's what you're reporting.
Yes, actually all through the patio. And the other thing to remember is, we don't have any roots extending outward towards the house foundation. So normally, if I'm looking at a tree where you have to trench or excavate close to the base of the tree, if you're dealing with just one side, sometimes you can work with that and it'll tolerate it. But here we're looking at significant impact on two sides of the root. It's like the base of a wine glass. If you start cutting off edges of the base on one side, it'll still stand. You do two sides, well, it just becomes that much more unstable. So, and we definitely know there are a lot of roots in this area behind the retaining wall and below the deck.
Thank you for your answer and the new information. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So looks like we can return to, if there's nothing further about this report from Turbin on tree 4, let's go to tree 3. Do you have something you'd like to discuss about tree 3?
I do, and it will be short and sweet here.
Okay.
Just to second up with what James said earlier. So when we initially looked at this, we saw the elbow to 45, and I got an approximate limb weight, not the actual large trunk part of the tree, but one of these accessory limbs. And we estimated around 200 to 300 pounds would be the impact load of one of these falling. I analyzed the existing roof decking, and the tongue groove decking would not be able to handle a 200 to 300 pound load. And now, I mean, it's increased essentially because of the decay in the elbow of the tree to where this huge mass, which weighs over 1,000 pounds, and to make it worse, when you're at a 45-degree angle here, you have much more leverage force coming down on this kind of critical failure point. So that's really all I wanted to touch on for tree number 3, is that it's, you know, the danger has increased exponentially to this going through the roof and causing substantial harm to someone living there.
Thank you. Do you have questions? The council members have any questions of that report on tree 3? I don't see any. So at this point, I'll just ask the arborist and the structural engineers to stay around, but we will move on to, oh, yes, Mr. Rifkind.
Madam Mayor, may the applicant Tammy Kornfeld address the council briefly?
Certainly, I was going to her next.
Great, thank you.
Hi, welcome.
Am I unmuted?
No, you're great.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, Mayor Way and Larkspur City Council members. I wanted to just quickly share some of the events that have led me to tonight's appeal. And first of all, to let the council members and the community members know that I care very much about the redwood trees in Larkspur and in Baltimore Canyon and on my property. The trees contribute so much to our neighborhood, a neighborhood I've chosen to be a part of since 2006, when I became a tenant at 314 West Baltimore. I love the natural environment and community so much that 5 years later, I purchased 321 West Baltimore. Somebody who doesn't like trees wouldn't have chosen to buy that house. But unfortunately, I've concluded, as have the arborist and structural engineer, that 2 additional trees must be removed for the preservation of human safety and property. Thankfully, many redwood trees are going to remain on my property, and I look forward to doing my part to care for those trees and assure the community that is what I'll be doing. When I decided to purchase my home in the summer of 2011, I was aware that there were trees extremely close to the home and its structure. So as part of my due diligence, I made a trip to the City of Larkspur Planning and Building Department desk and, expressed my concern and wanted to find out what I could do if something were to happen. And I was given the Larkspur Municipal Code for the removal of heritage trees. I read that document and felt assured that if the trees ever posed a hazard with respect to disease, danger to occupants, or the structure, that Larkspur had a policy in place that would allow for their removal. So I went ahead with the purchase, and I'm happy I did so. My daughters and I have enjoyed living on West Baltimore very much. In September, I appeared before the Parks and Recreation Commission seeking removal for 4 trees from my property. They approved 2, and then the other 2, they reserved judgment, sort of a wait and see kind of decision, and encouraged me to get more information, which I have done. And so that's why I'm appealing the council for removal of the 2 trees not approved, and feel like we have produced additional evidence that the experts have summarized supporting that removal. The tree in the front is a major hazard. Arborist concludes that it's likely to fail, and the engineer says the roof can't withstand the impact. In the rear, I have a failing retaining wall because of the roots, and really no viable option to rebuild the wall in place. I tried once to do that a number of years back. Relocating the wall, I don't know if you've seen the numbers attached to Kelly Turbin's report, but they're prohibitive for me to do anything like that. And then I would have negative impacts on my home as well. And then in addition, the arborist says that that tree is also at risk of a failure. So that's why I'm respectfully asking the council members to give weight to the undisputed findings of the experts in approving my tree removal permit. Additionally, I have 6 letters of full support for the removal of all 4 trees I originally requested. 4 of those letters are from neighbors that are immediately adjacent to my home. Donna Reardon at 319, Joe Horenheiner at 334, Stacy and Craig Ramey at 330 West Baltimore, and most importantly, Heather Bell, who rents my home at 321, where she resides with her husband, Tom, and 3 young children. Heather wrote, "The 3 trees in the front area near the house are unhealthy and pose a real safety risk for falling on the house, which places my family's safety at risk." End quote. Lynn has already mentioned this, but I wanted to remind the council and community of an event that occurred on January 14th, 2013, when a redwood tree just 2 doors down from my house fell across the street and literally crushed the home at 320 West Baltimore. It took down power lines. Thankfully, no one was hurt. We were just lucky. I can share pictures of that. In balancing stewardship and safety, I think we should put safety first, and urge you to make a decision for removal and protect my tenants, their small children, and my neighbors. And then kind of last point is without the council's support for my appeal, I'm going to be burdened with statutory disclosures regarding the hazards we've identified that will make my home difficult or impossible to rent, sell, or insure. And then most importantly, I will have been prevented from taking action at my own expense to prevent an avoidable injury and or damage to the property. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I know Mayor Way came to the property. I appreciate that because I think it was probably helpful to see it. And thanks for reading all the materials, and I'm open to any questions, and I can share those photos of 2013 if you'd like.
Thank you for your contribution to this tonight. And I appreciate your letter that you submitted earlier, which outlined a lot of this. And I think it was very responsible of you to seek further clarification on some of the questions that came up at the original meeting. And those were presented tonight. So if you're open to any questions from the council, if they have any, does any of the council members have any questions of Tammy? Councilmember Hilmer looks like he does, and so does Councilmember Paulson. So
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank everybody for the new information tonight, and I'd be ready to hear public comment and then move on to council discussion and action.
Great.
And Madam Mayor, this is Kevin Haroff. I want to endorse what Councilmember Hilmer just said. This was a very productive presentation, and I'm ready to move on.
So let's close this section by having Councilmember Paulson ask his question that he had indicated he had.
Yeah, sorry, no question. Just Tammy, I wanted to thank you as well for, taking the time, being responsible. I feel like, especially in West Baltimore with, the vegetation management we're doing, the stewardship and striking the balance between protecting the trees and, protecting people's lives is important. And you've really added to that, process. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, so everybody stay here, and what we will do now is open this to public comments, since this is a public hearing. And Allison, I'd like to begin and ask you if there is anyone who during the course of this meeting has indicated, written in a email public comment.
Thank you. There have been no emailed public comments for this public hearing.
Has there been anyone who's called in addition, other than the people who are already here in a meeting?
I've not been monitoring that, but I believe if they could raise their hand by pressing the raise hand icon, that would indicate if they'd like to give public comment.
Great. So we have some attendees tonight. If you would like to speak to the City Council or ask a question on this matter, please raise your hand now. I'll give everybody a few minutes to find that little icon. It looks like there has been no one raising their hand. So since we have no one in our audience who would like to make public comment, and there have been no emails sent in during the course of this meeting, we will close public comment.
Madam Mayor, there is a hand raised now.
Oh, there is. I missed that. Pardon me. Thank you. We do have a hand raised from on the 924-1402. So if you could unmute yourself and please identify yourself, we appreciate that.
Yes, James Holmes, Larkspur. I actually remember when that house was built. I was a little boy. With regard to potential mitigation regarding tree number 4, which, as the mayor's pointed out, is actually 3 trees. And yes, that's how those trees, almost all of the redwood trees in Larkspur are essentially sprouts from large stumps in the old growth forest that was logged in the 1840s and 50s. So that's what you have are essentially three trees there, which are suckers. But my question is, and I don't have the benefit of looking at the picture of the retaining wall, but my question would be, how important is it to maintain or retain all or some of that retaining wall in the vicinity of the tree? In Madrone Canyon, I've seen where retaining walls that were compromised were simply taken out, and the tree provided a degree of retaining, and or a kind of a rock garden or something was placed around it. And it turned out that although the retaining wall may have been needed at one time, it no longer was. And in this case, apparently the tree has grown around and anchored itself under the retaining wall. So I wonder if perhaps some of the retaining wall could simply be taken out. I'd also say, I mean, there are retaining walls I've seen which are within well more than 3 trunk diameters, but in my foundation, certainly. This is a redwood tree. And the other issue would be, could the situation be mitigated by removing perhaps 1 or even 2 of the large trunks and retaining 1 of them, perhaps 1 or 2 of them, and that might reduce some of the problems on the retaining wall or otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holmes. So I think to summarize, your question is about the retaining wall being removed. I think not having had the benefit of actually visiting the place or visiting the structure, that probably is hard for you to visualize, but I can have that spoken to by Mr. Turbin, and your second question was in regards to just possibly removing part of tree number 4. I think I got that correctly. So I know Mr. Holmes did not have the benefit of actually visualizing where the proximity of that retaining wall is to your physical home, which is very close by. So is there something you can answer of this, Mr. Turbin?
Sure. So to answer the question about removing the wall, if you were to remove the wall, the maximum stable slope that would be allowed would be a 2-to-1. So essentially, you'd have to grade the hill at a 2-to-1 all the way down onto the patio. I mean, that would put dirt up at her door. And I don't believe you would still catch a 2-to-1 all the way up the hill. So yeah, if you remove the wall, you would need to grade the entire backyard at a stable slope. You'd have to bring in fill, you'd have to compact it, but essentially your whole backyard would be filled with dirt. Not to mention it would probably end up being 2 to 3 feet above her floor. So then you would need a separate retaining wall at the back of her house.
For the benefit of those who had not visited the property, this home is pushed up into a hillside with a slope, a pretty steep slope directly behind it, in which these trees 3 and 4 are, or at least tree 4 is there. 3 is in a different location, but it's a very steep slope in the canyon.
Yeah. I mean, that would be more of a punitive option than the retaining wall option that we diagrammed.
Okay.
If it's even feasible. I think it actually might be too steep to the point where you would never even catch the existing hill grade at a 2-to-1.
I see no other hands raised, and there's been no other public comment submitted. So at this point, I will close public comment and return this discussion to the City Council.
Madam Mayor, did you want to hear from Mr. McNair about the potential removal of 1 or 2 of the trunks from tree number 4?
Sure.
Okay. I guess the way I would characterize that is it would be tricky. One, I think before I even attempted that, I'd want to do a root collar excavation where you're exposing all the structural roots and looking at their distribution on the slope. And often when you partially remove, this is a 3-trunk structure, so they're interconnected at the base, and it's common when you removed 1 or more of trunks of a multiple trunk tree, you can increase the risk of the remaining tree failure. You've modified wind loads against that trunk. You've changed a lot of dynamics that are really difficult to predict. And I would say there is another tree close to this cluster, just upslope. So I'm not sure there would really be an advantage of that enough to warrant the just even trying to do that. So
okay,
that's my response.
Okay, so now that there's no more public comment and those questions have been answered, I'll bring it back to the council. Are there further questions you have of the appellant or her representative or our 2 experts here? Seeing none, we were given 3 options by staff recommendations. One was to adopt Resolution A, upholding the decision of the Park and Rec Commission denying the removal. Part 2 recommendation was to adopt Resolution B, the alternative, which was to approve the removal of both trees, or we could decide to continue the matter. Would anyone like to?
Madam Mayor, this is
Yes.
Councilmember Kevin Haroff. This has been a very helpful conversation, but I think we've probably heard what we need to hear, and I would like to move to adopt Resolution B, approving the removal of both trees and granting the appeal.
So I have a motion for adoption of Resolution 7220, alternative B. Is there a second? Councilmember Paulson seconded that. So we have a motion and a second. Allison, would you do a roll call, please?
Councilmember Candell?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Helmer?
I want to vote yes, but make sure it's understood that I can make the findings according to the Larkspur's Heritage Tree Ordinance to grant the appeal.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's appropriate.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Haroff,
Yes.
Mayor Way.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for participating on this tonight. And thank you, Tammy, for your continued support of the process while we go through it in a very cumbersome way with this COVID-19 restrictions. So a resolution 7220, the alternative B, which overturned the Park and Recreation's decision on 3 and 4, has passed.
Thank you. Thank
You
you
are
all.
welcome to stay at our meeting, or you are welcome to sign off. We won't be
Madam
offended.
Mayor, can I make one last comment?
Yes, please.
I just want to make sure that the Park and Rec Commission understands that based on the new information and the encouragement of the Parks and Rec Commission to have us look at new information, that it allowed us to make the decision this evening. And we thank them for their work and the work of all the parties involved.
Well said.
Well said and endorsed, I think, by all of us on the council. Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us, and everyone, thank you for participating. That brings us to business items. We have business item 8.1, which is update on the general plan update process, completion of administrative draft general plan 2020-2040, schedule for environmental impact report. And I believe our esteemed planning director, Neil Toft, will be giving the staff report on this.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Way and members of the City Council. I think I'm sharing, let me make sure I'm sharing the correct screen here.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, I am. Okay. So thank you very much. I'm very pleased to announce that the General Plan Steering Committee has completed its part of the process, and staff is preparing the release of the administrative draft for the general plan update.
This gets a clap from me. Yay, yay, yay.
Yes, and our mayor and our Vice Mayor Haroff are both members of the steering committee team. So they've been involved in this process. We're here tonight, we'll be discussing how we're making the plan available to the public for their review and comment, how to participate in this upcoming process. And I'll discuss the public review and EIR process moving forward. So starting with just a little quick background, what is the general plan? Why is it so important? The general plan serves as the constitution for development of the city, and it does this through establishing overall goals and policies that are really direct conceptual courses of actions to implement goals, and the action programs. The programs are specific procedures or actions to carry out, whether in a continuous fashion or by certain actions to carry out those policies and goals. Now, the general plan informs the zoning ordinance, specific plans. It informs the capital improvement program and other regulatory and policy documents throughout the city. It's important that general plans are aligned with, and other policy documents and actions are aligned with the general plan. I would characterize this general plan as being just that. It is very much a high-level view. This was the approach of the CAC and the steering committee in particular. The general plan relies on a lot of subordinate documents, such as the bicycle pedestrian master plan, or our climate action planning process, as the tools to implement more specific procedures and standards and regulations, as opposed to some general plans carry design standards or some very specific guidelines within them. This general plan, we're relying on a lot of the tools that we have and are already using. That's part of this update, is to really bring this our old general plan into conformance with a lot of our current practices in the city. So this all began back in 2010 when the City Council initiated a focused update of the 1990 general plan and appointed a 26-member Citizens Advisory Committee. And that committee was made up of citizens from all sorts of background, as well as business owners with various interests to help guide the update. And at that time, the council found the 1990 general plan remained a fairly effective governing document for the city. And the direction really was to just revise and kind of update and refresh that 1990 general plan. And so the work of the committee lasted for a couple of years. From 2010, they conducted numerous meetings, field reviews, and some special committee assignments, and ultimately reviewed the various draft elements that had been prepared by staff, updating the prior draft, the prior general plan, and they provided direction for and refinement. And they concluded their review of the draft elements in 2012. And while that draft provided a strong framework for the general plan update, there remained more significant work to do to complete and finalizing it, including evaluation of noise, air quality, and traffic. And additional updates have been needed since that time, as due to more recent developments, such as transit projects and other state mandates not previously considered by the Citizens Advisory Committee. Now, after 2012, the city did engage in the Smart Station Area Plan, and then subsequently we were involved in updating the housing element. There was an urgency in doing that to meet the state guidelines for housing and to keep the city in legal out of legal jeopardy and make sure we're meeting our housing goals. So it wasn't until 2017 that the city and staff really got back to work on the general plan. And other work we had to do was finish production of the formatting and the graphics and various figures that were involved in the plan. So in 2017, we restarted the process and still recognized there were more updates to do. The council appointed the steering committee to assist staff in further updating and finalizing the document. This was an effective process. It was started in 2018. Again, it built on the Citizens Advisory Committee work, and we held 13 study session meetings and 2 public workshops. The last one, which was held on October 12th. So at that time, we finished review of the administrative draft. We provided a working administrative draft, essentially assembling all the various elements that had been under review, adding the graphs and the graphics and the figures. And at that time, from a land use perspective, again, the draft doesn't propose any significant land use changes or changes to densities prescribed under the current general plan. We have added a mixed use category that would apply to the Ross Valley Sanitary District site that would allow continuation of the precise plan that's currently approved for that site, or other potential mixes of similar uses, meeting similar goals for housing and connectivity and economic vitality in that area. We've also applied, revised what's called the restricted commercial designation. We're calling that neighborhood commercial and applying that to the entire North Magnolia area. And we're encouraging in the general plan, encouraging more resident serving uses and mixed residential use in commercial areas. I've highlighted a few of the changes to land use. And as you can see in our attached memo that we gave to the committee last week, outlining very briefly some of the changes throughout the document. There were a lot of updates to the other elements to be more consistent with the state mandates, current state mandates, and practices that are both required and practices we engage in now. So now that we've finished the general plan steering committee process, staff is in the working on putting the finishing touches on the administrative document. There's a few more, just clearing out all the syntax issues, doing the formatting. We're going to be putting large format diagrams available onto the website. So we anticipate by the end of this month, in the next week, we'll have the website, the finished administrative draft up on the website with more diagrams. And we'll also have a dedicated email for persons wishing to ask questions or make comments on the document. And I'd also encourage anyone in the community, will certainly do outreach, and we'll encourage people to sign up for the Notify Me process. There's a link to that right from our general plan update webpage for people to get notifications as we begin doing workshops and public hearings. So a couple of things that'll be coming up within the next month. We'll be filing a notice of preparation for the EIR for the general plan, and we'll be beginning consultation with responsible agencies that serve in and around the city of Larkspur. And we'll be conducting a scoping meeting. This is the first stage of preparation of an EIR to involve the public or any interested community members in identifying any particular environmental issues they think really need to be recognized or addressed. And this should happen at the end of the month or potentially the first week in October. We do want to avoid conflicts with the Thanksgiving holiday, but we're going to schedule that fairly readily and begin the EIR process. Sure, I'll jump in here. And then we'll begin preparing the draft EIR in this process. And during that time, we'll hold some informational workshops so the commission can, and the council and the community can become more informed as to details of the updated plan. We can begin hearings and then have hearings on the draft EIR once that is released. We're targeting May of 2021. It's possible that may be sooner if we can really light a fire and get it going. We just want to make sure we're not over promising the dates here, but we think that's possible. And so the things we'll have to do before we have public hearings on the draft EIR is get it completed, notice and circulate the draft EIR, and then we can begin public hearings. Typically, agencies schedule 2 meetings for both the Planning Commission and the City Council for the public review process. And it is required that the Planning Commission review and advise on the general plan. As we're not proposing any significant land use changes at this time, we're hopeful the draft will be well received by the community and we'll have an efficient process. After those initial meetings and at the end of the 45-day response comment period, we'll prepare responses to comments, prepare a final general plan with any recommended revisions. And then we'll go on to final hearings, certifying the EIR, the mitigation monitoring reporting program, and findings for the final general plan, and adopt the general plan and publicize the notice of completion. Again, we're not proposing any significant land use changes. We have a timeline that's based on a fairly reasonable best case scenario. These things can get delayed if there's significant comments that require evaluation and response. But again, we're hopeful we can go on a fairly timely process. I'll note that the general plan is occurring, all these elements are separate from the housing element. We are currently on our 2015 to 2023 housing element cycle, and the general plan does not present any conflict with our current housing element or Plan Bay Area 2040, the current sustainable community strategy. Now, on that topic, I do want to just kind of bring up a couple of things that we're involved with, largely related to housing, and that certainly will affect the upcoming housing element update to start later, to start next year, early next year. We have 3 collaborative projects. We're working with the county and other agencies in Marin, utilizing funding from SB2 planning grants that are administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. One of those is the ADU website. As the city manager mentioned earlier, the ADU website and the workbook is being published. The website is up and active. And this is a collaborative effort to provide a common source website, very interactive, to really assist residents throughout the county in understanding not just the local regulations for developing ADUs, but also understanding how to plan for ADUs, design, some of the various issues dealing with contractors, construction, design, financing, and other factors such as managing tenants and things like that. So it's an informative, it'll be an informative webinar next Thursday. Planning staff at this webinar, Larkspur planning staff will be available. There will be a breakout session for members in our community to ask questions of our ordinance and our process. Another project we've been working on collaboratively is the ODDS, the Objective Design and Development Standards. We do have a web page that is informative on that process. It does link to the county's webpage, which provides a lot of information on the process to date. We will begin initiating some study sessions at the Planning Commission to review draft toolkits and codes for implementing objective design standards as necessary. And essentially, objective design standards are the ability of the city to sort of dictate design preferences for projects which may be mandated to not be subject to discretionary design review. So it's a preemptive effort to put in place tools for housing projects if they are deemed by state law to be exempt from traditional discretionary housing. So it's something we're working with the county on. And I would note that in the toolkit, there are some Larkspur sites that were selected as being really model designs to be utilized for helping design the details for some of the toolkits and the parameters for development. So I think that'll be exciting. And on a separate note, one other item under that grant is there's an inclusionary housing and fee nexus study that's being done, led largely by the county, but we're tangentially involved in that. And inclusionary housing is important to developing affordable housing, because inclusionary housing is requiring a certain proportion of your developments to have affordable housing. And then there are also fees that can be connected to either as an in lieu fee for inclusionary housing, or other fees that might be connected to residential or commercial development to help support affordable housing. So that's a study that is underway to help inform our next, largely would inform our next housing element. It'll be important for us to have that updated information, because as much as inclusionary housing can help create affordable housing, it also can be an obstacle. There's an interesting balance to that because it does add cost to development. And if you've read the papers lately, San Rafael has actually reduced its inclusionary housing requirement in order to encourage more development that is financed by the market rate development that it provides. So that's a summary of a few housing projects we're working on under that grant. And of course, the council is familiar with the recent RENA process, which is paralleling Plan Bay Area 2050. And we're really looking at what could be some significantly higher numbers for our next RENA cycle. This process will need to begin early next year to begin looking at sites and begin looking at policies and the data and information and demographics we need to support that housing element. I note here on the slide, there is funding. There's significant funding being provided by the state for both our local process and also funding that will be going to the county and to ABAG to help support our housing elements, to support consultant support, and also to support all the development of data and the type of content that we'll need to meet in order to comply with HCD's requirements. So those are just a few of the processes that we'll be involving our staff with in the upcoming year and two. So with that, again, I'll go to final slide. Next steps, again, will be posting the final administrative draft towards the end of this next week, as well as some additional information on the website on how to be involved and the schedule, and looking for a scoping meeting, scheduling a scoping meeting late next month or early December. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for that. It's been a lot of work. And I appreciate how much the staff has been doing with that, with their consultants and our staff. There's a lot more to come from this. And I know your report was 378 pages or so at this point. So I'm looking forward to having the opportunity for people in the community to read it and comment on various things. And hopefully we can continue to enhance it. Well, this was an overview, and we're not going to look at any specifics tonight. Is there any questions, initial questions?
A comment, Madam Mayor, but I
Sure.
think somebody else jumped ahead of me, so that's fine.
Oh, could you close down your screen, Neil, so we can make this?
Oh, yeah.
And then we can make the display bigger, or I can make the display bigger. There you go. So, Dan Hilmer, did you have a question?
I did. Just a quick question. When the housing element is considered in the future, will that come back as a general plan amendment? Or could Neil clarify on how that will be incorporated into the work we're doing now? And I want to also express my gratitude and appreciation for the staff and the members of the steering committee that did all this work. It's wonderful, and I look forward to the public review.
The housing element may include, may and probably will likely include some amendments to the general plan, particularly potentially the addition of more mixed use categories or areas where we may seek to encourage housing or conversion of existing either commercial or office uses to housing. So that will result in a deeper dive. And I think our strategy at this point is we have a general plan that covers a lot of the tangential bases about city policy and so on. And then as we do the housing element, it's going to become a really roll up your sleeves and look at sites and look at the policies relating strongly to land use and potentially circulation as well.
Thank you. I think it's important, just speaking for myself, I'll be looking forward to trying to work within the descriptions and policies and goals of the current general plan when we consider the housing element in the future.
Kevin, did you have a question?
Not a question, but just a moment to reflect. This has been a process that has taken a long time and a lot of effort. And I just want to express my appreciation to Neil Toft for sticking with it. It's been a revision of a general plan is an extraordinarily complex thing, and it requires a lot of input from a lot of different people, but it also requires leadership from our staff and Neil and in particular, and I want to express my appreciation for him. I also want to just call out the principal consultant that we've had on this project, which is Leonard Charles, who has been with us in innumerable meetings in discussing aspects of the general plan and has been extraordinarily helpful. So we still have work to do, and we have a public process to go through, but it cannot be understated how substantial an effort this has been over a period of years. And I'm glad we are where we are. So thank you.
And I'd like to actually take that and let you know, Leonard is actually in the audience. He's attending. And he's been very helpful and has provided a lot of work and support. And additionally, the assistant to the city manager, Shannon O'Hare, has also been instrumental in helping move this process forward the last few years, and also helping a lot with all this final formatting, getting the document in order, and working with the website. So her and her assistant Drew.
Yeah, you bet. It
Great.
It cannot be understated how big a deal this is to be getting to where we are and getting this done.
Gabe, did you have a comment or a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to echo everyone's gratitude, Neil, and I really look forward to reading the doc. It's pretty lengthy, and I hope to get together with you. Quick question, without the benefit of reading all 350 pages, I just searched for flood and it comes up 250 times and fire comes up 200 times. Could you just, at a very high level, say the 1990 plan certainly didn't have all the, sort of the considerations for flood and fire safety, which we're so well aware of now in 20. Just at a high level, capital improvements, zoning, land use, where do you see the major adjustments for flood and for fire?
Well, I think just to echo your comment is the 1990 general plan did mention sea level rise. It mentioned wildfire and flood concerns, and it did that within probably a few paragraphs and 4 or 5 policies or actions. A lot of work was put into updating the health and safety ordinance, the health and safety element. And in fact, a lot of assistance from Ruben Martin, who at the time was the city fire marshal, now interim chief. He was very instrumental in that process, in forming the document. A lot of updates to reflect current practices in terms of fire safety and the way the organizations, the various fire agencies are now looking to address wildfire, and just many layers of policies and actions to some degree to, again, reflect our practices in how development and development within the community needs to recognize and be done in a manner that assures or minimizes the risk of wildfire and flood. The sea level rise, there's still work to do on that through working with the county on adaptation measures. But the general plan recognizes sea level rise as a threat and provides direction for the city and staff to move forward in addressing that through adaptation, both in terms of city actions as well as development policy. So the zoning ordinance will see changes in order to address the likelihood of sea level flooding and increased flooding and sea level rise.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, no, that's a great start. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, if no further questions, I look forward to continuing this process. And we've got another 6 months ahead of us. So thank you, Neil, for that. And look forward to the community's input also when they have access to the document. So that brings us to item 8.2, which is our sort of standing item about financial update. We have review mandates, obligations, expenditures, review opportunities, and next steps. And take it away, City Manager Dan Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually the last of a series of presentations that we've done. And I'm going to take over the screen here and do a presentation. So we started on September 2nd. We had a very academic discussion about service levels. We followed that up on the 16th with a very preliminary view of where our revenues looked at the end of the last fiscal year. And then at your last council meeting, we gave you some of our early signs of what we're seeing in 2020. And we reviewed what the general fund actually pays for. Tonight, we'll talk about mandates and obligations and expenditure levels. We'll touch on the possible revenue opportunities that exist, and then we'll offer some thoughts about next steps. And at that point, I'll stop talking and it'll be time for the council members to start going over this material. So mandates, obligations, and expenditure levels. You've seen this pie chart many times. This is the general fund expenditures broken down by the categories that we use to identify them. You can see that your public safety departments are your largest two expenditures. And of course, those are both joint powers authorities that we partner with other agencies, and in doing so, we keep our costs considerably lower than they would be if we tried to operate standalone departments. I want to touch on tonight the concept of mandates versus commitments. And what I'm going to do here is say that for this purpose, we're going to say a mandate is something that's legally required by state or federal law, as opposed to commitments, which are meeting the public's expectations. And, you know, in Larkspur, we often talk about the fact that our commitment to our community is to preserve quality of life. And our municipal code and resolutions and ordinances that the council pass are all about that commitment to preserving quality of life. And it's important, though, to understand that those aren't necessarily mandatory. A lot of the things that we do that you give us direction to do and rules and regulations that you pass locally are not mandates, but rather they are commitments or obligations that we impose upon ourselves to pursue our goal. And in fact, when you start to look at state and federal law, you discover there are surprisingly few mandates. For example, police, we must provide police protection, but how we do that and to what level we do that is actually quite discretionary. And you can, if you take a step back and you look around the state, you realize that the way policing is done in different communities is very different, and the investment in police is very different, and the ability to protect the public is affected as a result. Similarly with fire, we do have to provide fire protection and emergency medical support, but how we do that and to what level is discretionary. And we're actually a wonderful example of that. For a number of years, because of budgetary constraints, we really had underinvested in fire prevention. We had been very strong in fire protection and emergency medical response. And the council in Larkspur and the council in Corte Madera made a conscious effort to invest considerably in fire prevention over the last, I'd say, 5 to 7 years. And we're starting to see the payoff of that investment. Again, with maintenance, we don't really have a lot of clear mandates, but disrepair does lead to liabilities and compliance issues. So it's important that we continue to invest there and have reasonable service levels. And then there are some mandates in state and federal law about engineers signing off on projects. So whether we want to or not, we need an engineer around on our team. I don't know if Julian's still watching. He was here earlier, so just a little poke. In planning and building, Neil would probably argue with me, but interestingly enough, when you really dive deep into state law, some of these things that we often think of are mandates, how we do them, why we do them. It's unclear whether they're mandates or the consequences of not complying is so dire that we treat them as mandates. And in the case of planning and building, if we don't comply with the many state rules and regulations, they can come in and seize local control from us. Most of admin, other than the need for you to have people to manage the revenues that are coming in pursuant to tax and government codes, most of it's not mandatory. And in fact, I love my job and please don't get rid of me, but technically a city manager is not mandatory under California law. You could switch to another form of government. And then community services, so this is our recreational library, and those are entirely about quality of life, and they're not mandated under state or federal law. So a lot of these commitments or obligations that I'm talking about are defined in our municipal code and in key documents like the general plan. And you heard Neil say in his presentation that the general plan is a guidebook for policy, and it really is. It's an important statement about who we are and what we want our community to be. We set a lot of our service levels to fulfill not just mandates, but to pursue these obligations that have been defined. So we often talk about our service levels as mandated levels, then sort of standard. We kind of pursue standard levels, industry standard levels, and then of course the ideal or optimum if money was not an object. And I thought I'd give you my very, very cursory, at a glance, paintbrush thoughts about where we currently are in the economic climate that we're facing with service levels. I think tremendous respect and kudos to our team at Central Marin Police and at Central Marin Fire. They worked really hard to keep our service levels as close to standard as possible or close to normal as possible, given the financial constraints that we've been facing. They kept their budgets flat, and they figured out some really creative ways to make sure we could continue to enjoy these critical services. It's going to be challenging if the economy doesn't rebound, and this is probably an area where we may be having to face very tough conversations in the future. You know, we've scaled back in maintenance. We've put our workers on furlough, and you're seeing the effect of that. If you go around town, you're seeing it's taking us longer to get to the parks, to touch the different maintenance items. We are making sure that our liability is covered. So when there's a dangerous condition, we're still dealing with it. And because our buildings are currently either closed to the public, or facilities like some of the structures in the park are open on a more limited basis, we've been able to hold our own there. We're definitely not operating at a level I would call normal or standard. We have been fortunate to keep our engineering services, what I would say sort of above that standard line, but that's in part because we've transferred so many costs of engineering into the projects, and the projects are being funded by grants and other sources. They're not being funded by the general fund at this time. Planning and buildings definitely been an area we've curtailed in the current economic climate, but that's also reflective of the changing nature of what people are asking for from planning and building in the COVID environment. I've told you a few times now that this is an area where the staff and I are constantly in contact and talking about what is going to be appropriate now and what's going to be appropriate in the near and far future as we sort of find our way in the current paradigm and then in the new world order that is post COVID. And then we've managed to keep our administrative levels holding, which has been important because communication's been so critical during this COVID time, and keeping our admin levels at what I would consider a normal level has been really helpful. I can't really give you a description of what the service levels in community services are. This is unprecedented. We're operating a library entirely by curbside pickup. We're offering recreation as if we have independent contractors or clubs that are willing to follow the COVID rules, we're working with them to offer some semblance of programming. Both divisions of community services are trying their best to offer online resources, but there's no benchmark that I have right now to tell you what this looks like in the service level world. I can't emphasize enough a point that I've made during several of these presentations that it's not really appropriate to talk about us having cut back the funding levels in community services, because we've cut them back in part because of our financial situation, but primarily because we can't offer the services because of the COVID restrictions. And I do think as we think about spending more money in the future, as the rules loosen on access to services, community services is where we'll be looking to reinvest. So again, just like to make sure everybody's aware, you can go into our general plan, our budget, and you can see this lovely pie chart gives you a good breakdown of how we're spending our money. And so maybe this would be a good point to pause and offer an opportunity for any questions about service levels and expenditures before I move on to the revenues.
Great idea. Is there any questions on this general overview from the first part of this presentation? I think Gabe Paulson has one.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for that. Real quickly, I loved your rating system, kind of mandated plus, standard plus. It's a good way to summarize priorities. Could you just briefly speak to how you arrived at that? I would think just the funding level change would be one way to assess, but another would be the actual programs and services delivered. I'm not sure, how, for example, planning is less. Is it because the money was cut, or because the output from last year is significantly been reduced?
I think if we bring Neil on, and he would probably tell you that from a volume standpoint, the department is still quite busy in terms of folks asking for service. What's happened is the type of services that they're asking for are less cost recovery, less revenue generating. And so we've had to scale our staffing levels knowing that that was going to happen. The consequence of that is that, one, our turnaround time on on applications is slower. We're still meeting our legal requirement, but we pride ourselves when we're operating at a normal or an above standard level that we turn things around very quickly. And we know people are getting frustrated because they're used to high responsive touch from planning and building, and things are taking longer. And so that's one issue. And the other issue is you're seeing Neil doing a lot more as the director of hands-on analytical work because he's had to reposition his staff to do other tasks. And so that means he's not doing some of the typical director work, and some of the deeper dive analytical work is not occurring and probably won't occur as robustly until we can return to better funding levels.
Thank you.
Doesn't look like there are other questions at this time. You want to move on to part 2?
Sure. These are very brief. So we asked ourselves, what are the revenue opportunities that the community might support? Because we certainly would like to look at these opportunities. The challenge here is we don't really, in my mind, have a strong argument that we have to go get money today. We have to look at what are the ramifications of the COVID economy for the city over the next year or two, and also off into the future. A good example of what I'm talking about is our hotel tax or transient occupancy tax. What does recovery look like? When we went through the recession in 2010, it took a good 5 years to fully recover on performance levels in that industry in California. And I think we can expect something similar, if not maybe even more dramatic. But we identified 4 potential areas that the council might want to talk about. The first is property tax. We certainly could go to the voters and engage them about whether they'd be willing to pass some form of assessment or property tax to supplement the city's budget. But I did want to note that in Larkspur in particular, and in California in general, property taxes have often been the domain of schools. And we have a measure in our area right now, Measure M. That's a property tax measure that one of our school districts is very concerned about and very dependent on. And so we have typically only asked for property assessments when we're doing facility improvements. We've tried to shy away from doing them for general operations and supplement of the general fund. We could look at sales tax again. There's still a quarter cent out there that's sort of unclaimed, if you will, in terms of legal capacity. I don't know what the community's appetite would be for that. And that would be something we could engage them on and talk about. We're going to have a great benchmark here in November because Santa Fe is actually asking its voters to pass a quarter cent sales tax to help them through the current economy over the next several years. There certainly are a number of special taxes or assessments, and I suspect every time I say taxes, Sky Woodruff is probably cringing that I'm not saying assessments or have it up in writing. But there's certainly a number of special assessment taxes and fees we could look at. Again, here the question is, what's the appetite of the community? You talked about one a few months back, which was whether or not to look at a special assessment sales tax wise on cannabis. Another one that's being debated around the state is a fee on providing drainage systems. And so, these are things we might want to look at. And then another one, a lot of cities have embraced over the last several years, a lot of general law cities, which Larkspur is a general law city, is becoming a charter city. So what that means is currently we're governed by state code. And so everything we can and can't do is found in the California Government Code. There is a process whereby cities can become what the state law defines as a charter city. And that's essentially a city that adopts its own constitution. And in our county, the one charter city is San Rafael. There are numerous examples of charter cities around the state, though I believe roughly a quarter of all the cities are charter cities. I'd have to double check that. And the reason we bring it up in particular is that there's one tax where there's a tremendous discrepancy between the general law provisions and charter law provisions. And that's over the property transfer tax. So this is a tax that a seller pays when a home is, or when property is sold. And the tax is an assessment on the transaction, and it's based on the assessed value that's taking place in the transfer. And so under general law, the seller pays $1.10 per $1,000 of assessed value. You will find that if you look at the charter cities around the state, the amount of transfer tax, rather than being that $1.10, oh, I apologize, I forgot to say that $1.10 is split half by the city and half by the county. So we're only getting 55 cents on that $1.10. You'll find that a lot of charter cities have adopted numbers of $5, $6, $10. There are some that are up now into the mid-teens. The county still only gets 55 cents from those charter cities. The balance goes to the cities. And the concept here is that the transfer tax is supposed to help correct some of the need to pay back for services that have been provided in the past, and to create some balance in terms of property tax related services moving forward. And so it is something the staff suggested a few times might be something the council would like to explore. So these are sort of the general categories that we looked at in terms of revenue opportunities, and I can take some questions before I move on to what our recommendations are for next steps.
So,
Madam Mayor,
Sure.
go ahead. Let's go, please.
no, go ahead.
No, I just, this has been a very helpful overview. And particularly the last item is something that has been an interest of mine in exploring possible opportunities to become a charter city. So I think there are a number of different advantages, I think, to doing that, although the transfer tax issue is probably the most obvious. But I'm hoping we'll have a robust conversation about that going forward in the coming months.
Other thoughts on the revenue opportunities? Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, Dan, you know it's coming, but you mentioned the cannabis dispensary tax. I was wondering if you looked into other cities or counties so we could have some kind of numbers so we could have a robust conversation about that as well.
So I haven't for this presentation tonight. I have been doing some research because the council's conversation certainly generated a lot of interest for staff in terms of what is going on out there. But you'll see in the recommendations that I do think some further exploration in all these categories is warranted, and staff's not necessarily tying our recommendations to any one particular revenue stream as being on or off the table.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the recommendations page.
So let's start with expenditures, because we did spend a lot of time over the last 2 months talking about expenditures. And I think it's really important that we sit tight. I know our instinct right now is things feel a little scary because we know revenues are slow, and we have an adopted budget that we used a couple of one-time fixes on. But we've taken the city services down quite a bit as it is, and we've adapted for COVID. I'm concerned that if we continue to cut in our expenditure area now, before we fully understand where things are headed with COVID and the economy, we may make decisions that put us off track for recovering in terms of the way we provide services and we protect that quality of life that's so important to our residents. I think it's very important that we continue to monitor the current fiscal year revenues, and I'd like to keep returning to you as sales tax numbers trickle in to give you a sense of where things are trending. But then my number one recommendation is I think the council should talk about forming an ad hoc committee to explore these revenue opportunities and come back to the council early in the new year with some recommendations in terms of paths to put us on. Most of these revenue opportunities require support of the voters. And while we certainly have some paths to do those in 2021, we're probably more talking about 2022 because a lot of revenue streams and elections align better with council elections, and the next council election is in 2022. There is some good news about bridging ourselves, because that certainly sounds a long ways away. And that's that, going back to some of the story I told you in the initial presentation, because of the bridge in particular, but also just because of your Administrative Services Director, Kathy Orm's prudent approach to finances, we've placed enough cash in reserve that we feel comfortable we can work our way through the next year. And so barring a complete and utter catastrophe economically, we feel we can use our reserves to keep ourselves going, provide the service levels we have now, position ourselves to do the recovery, and set ourselves up so that if there are new revenue streams that we want to pursue, we're in a great position to do that going into 2022. And that gives us a full year to properly engage the public about these concepts and these issues, and gauge their comfort level with the ones that we want to pursue. So our number one recommendation tonight, my number one recommendation, is that the council, and it can be at a future meeting, although the mayor always has the discretion at any time to appoint an ad hoc committee, and that's to make that sort of appointment. But we could certainly agendize it as a future item at your next meeting if you want as well.
Well, we did appoint an ad hoc finance committee back in March, which
And you
included,
have the option of converting that to this charge as well, Madam Mayor.
which included myself, Vice Mayor Haroff, and we engaged with ex-Councilmember Chu as our ancillary member of that. When we were making all those very tough, immediate decisions in COVID primary financial times in March, we could continue with that committee, or we could engage a different combination, but we would probably have to put that on a different agenda item. I'm comfortable with continuing in that ad hoc committee we started in March, unless there's others who are interested in participating in that. I think we had some pretty good conversations with our bond holders, et cetera, back in March. So any other thoughts of whether we want to start a new revenue opportunity committee or continue with the existing one?
Dan Hilmer here. I'm comfortable continuing with the existing committee.
Scott, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think there should be an additional committee to look into special opportunities, such as the cannabis issue, which I'd mentioned earlier, which nobody is willing to put the time or the energy into finding information about. I would be happy to be part of a committee to present, to see if there's actually anything there worth having a conversation about or not.
Well, I think I heard that would be considered, that might be a possible one under additional revenue opportunities. It sounded like Dan brought that up. Gabe, did you raise your hand there?
Yeah, I'm both happy for the committee to continue, and I also want to express interest. You know, if the opening arises, I'm pretty interested in at least 2 or 3 of the revenue opportunities. So just wanted to express that interest.
Well, I think we can keep a core committee and add data and information and contribution as specified by whatever particular topic we're investigating. That makes sense, because there's expertise on all of our levels on different things, and can bring in industry experts on various things. Is it possible? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to suggest, Madam Mayor, so that all the council has comfort that the committee is exploring topics that interest everyone. Perhaps I can meet with the mayor and vice mayor, and we'll put together a work plan that we can report back to the council about at the next meeting, so that we're sure that all the topics people want covered are listed in detail.
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's a good idea too, right?
Because and then it allows, if we have a work plan, it allows input to various subject matters that will require all of our input. Does that make sense?
The only final comment that I would make, because I'm happy to participate in this process as well, but only on the condition that we still drag Larry Chu into it wherever we can.
I'm sure he'd do that because he has great skills on our past budget processes. So
Well, he's also smarter than I am, so that's fine.
okay, so it sounds like what I'm hearing is we're going to continue with this revenue opportunities ad hoc committee, but we'll draft a work plan that includes contributions of various ideas and for that will contribute to our fiscal reserves. Is that right?
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
Good deal. Thanks.
We can
So-
bring that back to the next meeting if you'd like, Madam Mayor.
Great, great. I do like the sit tight on current fiscal year expenditures line though, because I think I think our conservative nature of spending in Larkspur's tradition has led us well when it's gotten tight like now. So the world out there is unknown as to how COVID's going to affect us in the next year economically for this country, but so far so good where we are. So that leads us to just an update on COVID, and I don't know if you want to launch into 8.3 now.
I'd be happy to, Madam Mayor. So a couple of updates. First, we are finally in a position where we're going to, I've mentioned a couple times, get something akin to what people call Amazon locker systems for the library, and we may use it for other departments. We've actually today done the work so that that can be connected to the building, and we're placing the order to have the equipment brought in. That'll really enhance our ability to continue to serve the public by providing a way to pick up library materials outside of the facility. We are trying to figure out now when and if we can start to allow visits into the library on an appointment basis. This is something I talked about that I thought we'd be doing by now. But one of the challenges we've run into is, I've mentioned it before, I think, but if you came into the library right now, you would see there's tables everywhere and they're covered in books. And that's because there are some standards that have been set for allowing the books to settle and be certain that if they somehow were carrying the virus is gone. And so it's quite a system they've had to come up with, but in our small library, it's taking up a lot of floor space. So it's made it really challenging to contemplate how we can let people into the facility. We're also working towards some level of appointment visits in the planning and building department. We're not seeing as much demand anymore for that. Folks are really adapting well to being online with our staff. But from time to time, there are folks who really want to be able to point to a diagram with the staff and dive deep into it. So we want to be able to facilitate that in a safe manner for both our staff and for the public. The other big challenge we're having is signage. A lot of signage has vanished or disappeared, and it's led to some confusion about what the rules are. So we are working hard to try to improve our signage, particularly in our parks. It's been really clear to us over the last couple of weeks that a lot of signage has disappeared. And so we're going to be putting up more permanent signs that explain the rules to folks because we're finding folks don't understand the rules, and that's okay. I work on this every day, and I'm not clear what the rules are. So we're certainly working to improve our situation in that regard. And then in close contact with Dr. Willis and my colleagues in the other cities as we prepare for the possibility that we're going to move up another tier in the state system and want to be able to facilitate a lot of that. And for better or for worse, the number one topic remains what constitutes indoor and outdoor. as we try to help our businesses, in particular our restaurants, sort that out so that they can think of ways to take their newly created outdoor dining and protect people from the elements, but also qualify as outdoor, not indoor situations. So it's a surprisingly long and detailed conversation that we're having. With that, Madam Mayor, if there's any questions from the council, I'm happy to take them.
Are there questions on our COVID-19 update? I know the rules change every day. They seem to change all the time, but I know at next Wednesday's MCCMC meeting and virtual dinner, the guest is Dr. Matt Willis to talk about the update to the county. So I don't see any questions, and thank you for that update. It looks like we're at the end of our agenda, and we will meet again on November 4th. Thank you all for participating tonight in a public hearing on this cumbersome Zoom session. And Dan Hilmer, you have a closing statement?
Oh, I just want to express appreciation to the staff and to the mayor for running a fine meeting tonight. There was a lot of content, and I'm very grateful for all your work.
Thanks.
Let me chime in with that. That's absolutely true. And I cannot express, and I go back to the discussion we had before on the general plan, which, you know, where we are on that now is really the culmination of a lot of effort on the part of the staff and consultants. And I just, it's terrific where we are. So thank you.
Okay. Good night, everyone. And this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all November 4th. And stay safe and don't eat too many Halloween candies.
And vote.
And vote. If you haven't voted already, you better get out there and vote. But I've already voted.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.